This is where the persecutor sows dissension or disunity, or even finds a way to make the church unattractive, so that it can no longer function as a caring, welcoming body. One of the greatest persecutors in history was a Roman emperor called Decius in 250 AD. And he knew how to do this. It was the 1,000-year anniversary of the Roman gods. Everyone should sacrifice to them, he decreed, and get a certificate saying they had done so from a certified magistrate. And he knew this would catch the Christians out. But some of them offered bribes to the magistrate, saying they had actually sacrificed when in fact they hadn't. What do we do? His officials asked him. And Decius said, just take the bribe. It's better to create an apostate than a martyr, he said. And why is this? Because the apostate goes back and creates division in the church. What should they do with him? Do they refuse him communion? What penance must they ask for him to be restored? Decius knew something his officials did not. Martyrs unite the church, but apostates divide it. So create apostates, not martyrs. That was very smart. So smart, he nearly wiped out the church. He knew if you compromise the community of faith, it pushes people away from that community. I remember this tactic being carefully employed in Romania in the Cold War. There was a Baptist pastor who enjoyed a fruitful ministry until a few years in he noticed that his congregation was no longer really receptive to his preaching. The church began to lose members. It failed to make the impact on the city that it once did. And this was a great grief to the pastor, but he put it down to the providence of God, that he'd been sent some years of growth, and he would just have to deal with some lean years as well. But the hardened hearts of his congregation had actually nothing to do with God at all, as he found out a few years later. After the fall of communism, one of his elders asked to see him privately one day, and the elder wept, and he confessed that when he had first joined the church, he had been a member of the secret police. And he said to the pastor, "We knew the influence you were having, so I was sent into the church to spread a lie. I watched for a few months, I gained the trust of the believers, and then I began to spread my poison. I began to gossip it about, that I suspected the pastor, you, were having an affair with a lady in the choir. And I was very careful not to have the lie traced back to me, but if you leak a little gossip, it spreads like wildfire, and the gossip had its effect, and the bond of trust between pastor and people was eroded, and the pastor's ministry became compromised, and he never even knew it. For 10 years the church declined, all because of the insidious power of gossip, a lie carefully placed to circulate and compromise the community. The pastor got together with that elder, and they both shared a sermon the following Sunday after the confession. And their text was James 3:5. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. God did not desert that pastor, though, and it's interesting that his sermon circulated widely to bless others, even if those in his own congregation were refusing to accept the truth from his mouth. And of course, the secret agent was converted under his ministry 8 years after he joined the church. Compromised communities, they rob the church of its power by sowing disunity, and the devastating effect is clear because no one wants to join a compromised community that's full of infighting and hypocrisy and hurt. But true unity is possible. We can always flip this tactic around. If compromising the community ruins the church, then the way we can revive the church is to ensure that our church is open, honest, caring, loving. It's not easy. Paul tells the Ephesians, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bonds of peace. Effort. That's hard work. And that can mean going to the pastor and asking if that rumor is true. It might mean speaking up and saying that truth was not honored. It might mean pressuring the church to do more for the community instead of being smug in its worship. That might mean hanging in with the church even when the decisions are not ones you like. Nothing fills a church quite like honesty in the spiritual life. Otherwise, why would the book of Psalms be most Christians' favorite book? Nothing attracts like real Christians doing real church. And there's a country where Christianity is totally banned, North Korea, a communist madhouse. But it has a large church, deep underground, and that's quite recent. When there was a famine in the late 90s, thousands fled. They crossed the border into China. The Chinese authorities said, these refugees must be turned in and returned, usually to their deaths. But the Christians in China welcomed North Korean refugees into their homes, and they didn't give them up to the police. They took great risks to shelter them. And many believed. Many of these refugees believed because they saw the risks Christians had taken just to offer them hospitality in the name of Christ, real church. And when they would ask the Chinese Christians why, they said, because Jesus gave his life to love us. Why should we not give up something to love you? Simple. And thousands believed and went back into the country of North Korea after the famine was over, back into the nightmare state. Because it was more important that others should learn of their new relationship with Christ than that they should live longer themselves. When we give up control, when we give up our life, when we do the right things in the right spirit, the community stays strong. The gospel starts spreading. Real church. Solid. Honest. Risk-taking. Loving. United. Not compromised. And revival creeps in to the most hostile state on the planet to the Christian faith.